Friends, thank you for being here today. What if I told you that the 2x4s holding up the walls of American homes have become the newest front in a bitter international trade war? And what if that conflict threatened to push the dream of home ownership out of reach for millions? While the Trump administration takes aim at a major Canadian export, the United States Commerce Department is increasing anti dumping duties on Canadian softwood lumber to 20.56. That is the reason these rates change, and it is why this rate has increased so dramatically, which will be very punishing to most, if not all, Canadian companies. But this is particularly another unjustified tariff. You can expect us to fight against it, and you can expect us to take specific steps to protect those workers. The reality is that the United States needs to import wood. It cannot produce enough wood on its own. It has to import because it cannot produce it. In breaking news, Washington has just pulled the trigger on one of the most explosive tariff hikes in decades. The United States Commerce Department has raised anti dumping duties on Canadian softwood lumber from 20.56% to 35%. That is not just a number, it is a political earthquake shaking both sides of the border. For decades, Canadian lumber has built America's homes, schools, and entire communities. But now, overnight, the cost of the wood that frames nearly one-third of United States construction is being taxed into oblivion. Is this a smart economic strategy or a reckless gamble in a fragile housing market? Ottawa's response was swift and uncompromising. The Prime Minister's office called the new tariff unjustified, protectionist, and a direct hit on Canadian workers. Canadian officials argue they have played by the rules, pointing out that international trade panels have repeatedly sided with them in past disputes. Yet, Washington doubled down, insisting that Canadian mills undercut United States producers. But here is the catch: America does not produce enough lumber to meet its own demand. Without imports, the numbers do not add up. So, why would the United States risk pushing housing costs even higher in an economy already strained by inflation? The political firestorm quickly escalated into an economic standoff. Ontario, home to some of Canada's largest mills, announced it would shut off America's lumber lifeline. For context, Canada ships around 28 million cubic meters of lumber to the United States every year, representing roughly $8.5 billion in trade value. Pulling that supply is like cutting off oxygen from an economy that breathed through construction and housing. Imagine the impact on every new build, every remodel, and every mortgage tied to a project now facing soaring costs. Could this be the tipping point that transforms a tariff dispute into a full blown supply war? Behind the headlines lies a deeper question about strategy. Tariffs are designed to shield domestic industry, but they often hit consumers first. A $250,000 home could now cost $10,000 to $30,000 more, simply because lumber is scarce. That means higher mortgages, higher property taxes, and delayed projects across states from Florida to California. Contractors are warning of layoffs. Financial analysts are already revising housing affordability indexes downward. Is Washington prepared for the political backlash when voters feel these numbers in their wallets? What started as a trade penalty has now morphed into something larger, a confrontation over supply chains, sovereignty, and survival in a globalized economy. If tariffs escalate into supply shutdowns, the collateral damage will not be measured just in trade deficits, but in family budgets, real estate markets, and the financial stability of millions. So the question is, how far are both sides willing to go before this trade fight turns into a crisis no one can control? The moment Ontario pulled the plug, the shock was immediate. Overnight, the United States lost nearly a third of its lumber supply. Think about that. 28 million cubic meters of Canadian softwood per year gone in an instant. That is the backbone of American construction. To put it into perspective, it is like losing the wood to build 16 Empire State Buildings every single month. Can any nation absorb that kind of hit without buckling under pressure? For decades, the American housing market has relied on Canadian timber to close the gap. Washington knows this. Every economist knows this. The United States can only meet about 70% of its own demand. That leaves a 25 to 30% shortfall, and Canada has always been the safety valve. With that lifeline severed, the market began to convulse. Lumber futures spiked within hours. Builders scrambled to secure contracts, and ordinary families, people saving every penny for a mortgage, suddenly faced price tags spiraling out of reach. But who really pays when a political fight over tariffs turns into a supply war? The numbers are brutal. A single family home that once cost $250,000 can now jump by $10,000 to $30,000 simply because the lumber is not there. That means steeper loans, heavier property taxes, and a credit market forced to adjust. Banks are already warning of tighter lending terms. Mortgage rates, sensitive to any hint of instability, could climb further. If one trade decision can inflate housing costs this quickly, what does it say about the resilience or fragility of America's financial system? Communities are already feeling it. Contractors in states like Ohio, Texas, and Florida report pausing projects mid-build. Supply yards sit half empty, their prices rewritten daily. Workers who thought they had steady hours are being sent home. It is not just a trade dispute anymore. It is a Main Street story, one where dinner table conversations revolve around whether the new porch or kitchen remodel has to wait another year. In a country still struggling with inflation, how long before frustration turns into political backlash? Beyond America's borders, global eyes are watching. Europe, already paying record high material costs, wonders if North America's housing volatility will spill over into global supply chains. Asian markets, flush with investment, see opportunity in the chaos. When one door slams shut, another opens. But who gets locked inside and who gets to walk away with the profits? And so the question remains, by turning tariffs into weapons and supply into leverage, has Washington miscalculated Canada's resolve, or has Ontario just rewritten the rules of the entire lumber game? The numbers tell the story before the headlines can catch up. Futures for softwood lumber which only weeks ago hovered at $650 per 1,000 board feet, are now threatening to surge past $765. That is not speculation. It is a warning flare. Every extra dollar ripples through budgets, contracts, and mortgages. And for builders already squeezed by labor shortages and higher interest rates, this is not just a market swing, it is a gut punch. But how did a tariff dispute ignite a global price shock so quickly? Contractors across America are sounding the alarm. The math is ruthless. A medium sized development that budgeted $2 million for lumber in early 2025 could now see costs balloon by $350,000 or more. Profit margins evaporate. Projects stall. Workers are sent home. The ripple effect moves fast. Local suppliers, hardware stores, and even banks that finance construction loans are dragged into the undertow. What happens when the backbone of an industry bends under this kind of financial strain? Replacing Canada's supply is not easy. Germany can ship perhaps 2 million cubic meters a year. Sweden adds another 1 million. Chile a bit more, but together they do not even reach 1/5 of what Canada used to provide. The global map looks full of options, but the reality is bare shelves and thin pipelines. As one analyst bluntly put it, lumber is not instant noodles. You cannot just order more. It takes years to grow a forest. Can the United States wait that long while its housing market teeters on the edge? And this crisis does not stop at America's borders. European buyers, already locked in bidding wars over scarce materials, now find themselves competing with United States firms willing to pay any price to keep projects alive. In Asia, developers watch closely, knowing that every disruption in North America reshapes global costs for steel, cement, and timber. When one market sneezes, another catches the flu. If the United States scrambles to import from Europe and South America, how will that reshape global trade balances in 2025 and beyond? Financial analysts warn of broader consequences. Rising lumber prices feed directly into inflation metrics, putting pressure on the Federal Reserve and rattling investors. Real estate trusts, construction stocks, and even municipal bonds tied to housing developments are exposed. Wall Street asks, are tariffs still a tool of strategy, or have they become a spark that lights the fuse of a global economic fire? So, here is the question every policymaker should face. When a trade war turns wood into a weapon, is anyone truly winning, or are we all just watching the world's scaffolding crack beneath our feet? The shock waves are no longer confined to boardrooms or futures markets. They are hitting American families where it hurts most, their homes. The National Association of Home Builders has sounded the alarm, warning that construction costs across the sector have climbed 10 to 15% since Canada slammed the brakes on lumber exports. For an industry already walking a tightrope, that is not a ripple, it is a landslide. And the question everyone is asking is simple: how much more can families afford to bear? The math is relentless. Lumber accounts for roughly 35% of the material cost in a single family home. With supply strangled, the impact is immediate. Analysts project that between now and 2027, the price of an average new home could climb by $10,000 to $14,000 purely because of lumber. That does not include higher mortgage rates, property taxes, or insurance premiums. For working class families, that extra burden could be the difference between owning a home and being locked out of the market altogether. Can the American dream survive when the numbers are stacked this high? In the short term, the pain is already visible. Builders report that new contracts are carrying $5,000 to $8,000 in unexpected costs. Under worst case scenarios, that figure balloons to $20,000 or even $30,000. And who shoulders it? Not Washington, not Ottawa. It is the young couple in Houston trying to buy their first home. It is the retired teacher in Sacramento downsizing into something affordable. It is every American trying to secure stability in an economy that feels anything but secure. Is this really what a trade war is supposed to achieve? Geography makes the picture even starker. California and Texas, the two largest housing markets in the country, are among the hardest hit. California already struggles with sky-high housing prices. Another $15,000 spike pushes dreams further out of reach. In Texas, where booming populations drive construction demand, builders are warning that projects will stall, leaving thousands of workers idle. If the nation's biggest states cannot shield their citizens, what hope is there for smaller markets in the Midwest or South? Globally, the contrast is striking. While Europe and Asia brace for higher input costs, some foreign markets see opportunities to capitalize on America's vulnerability. If overseas suppliers swoop in, prices will rise further, fueled by competition on a worldwide scale. Once again, ordinary Americans end up footing the bill. So, here is the dilemma. When trade wars turn into housing wars, is the policy still protecting jobs, or is it quietly dismantling the stability of American life? Ontario did not just slam the door on America, it opened new ones elsewhere. Within days of Washington's tariff hike, provincial leaders rolled out a bold support package for their lumber sector, with export quotas carefully calibrated to choke United States supply while redirecting shipments abroad. The effect: Washington was left scrambling while Canadian exporters suddenly found leverage they never had before. Was this retaliation, or was it chess played 3 moves ahead? The pivot was swift and calculated. Ontario announced new trade channels to the Asia Pacific and European markets, markets hungry for reliable supply as global construction heats up. In Tokyo and Seoul, importers welcomed the shift, eager to diversify away from unstable supply lines. European buyers, already reeling from high input costs, saw Canadian lumber as a lifeline. For Ontario mills, the message was clear. Why sell raw timber cheap to a hostile neighbor when new partners will pay premium prices? If you can sell smarter, why sell it all to someone who punishes you? But the strategy goes deeper than geography. It is about value. Instead of exporting raw logs, Ontario has doubled down on engineered wood, modular housing units, cabinetry, and kitchen furniture. These are not just planks of lumber. They are finished goods with margins 2 or 3 times higher. The precedent is telling. Back in 2020, even as raw timber exports dipped, Canada's processed wood exports surged 12%. The lesson was simple: processed products bring resilience, jobs, and higher revenue. Could today's crisis accelerate a permanent transformation of the lumber industry itself? The financial stakes are enormous. Analysts estimate that if Ontario shifts just 25% of current raw exports into value added products, annual revenue could grow by 2 to 3 billion United States dollars, even with reduced overall volume. That is a windfall, not only for sawmills, but for manufacturers, transporters, and workers in communities once dependent on a single commodity. Meanwhile, American builders, deprived of cheap imports, are left to absorb skyrocketing costs. Does this mean the United States is funding Canada's modernization by accident? Socially, the narrative is shifting too. In Ontario, the move is cast as a defense of workers and sovereignty. In America, it lands as a cautionary tale about over reliance on a single supplier. Around the world, policymakers watch closely. Can a trade war punish an adversary but leave them stronger in the long run? So here is the question. By turning tariffs into innovation, has Ontario just rewritten the rules of global lumber trade? And is Washington now trapped in the very game it thought it was winning? The lumber war did not stop at sawmills. Its shockwaves hit border crossings, tax rolls, and entire industries tied to North America's supply chains. Traffic at key United States Canada crossings has plunged. At the Rainbow Bridge near Niagara Falls, cross border shopping and freight traffic collapsed by 33% in just weeks. At the Peace Bridge in Buffalo, numbers are down 12%. These are not abstract statistics. They are trucks left idling, storefronts going dark, and small towns watching lifelines wither. If this is what happens after one tariff dispute, what happens when the dominoes keep falling? The financial toll is mounting fast. In Erie County, New York, officials estimate tax revenue losses of $4.9 million per month, directly tied to collapsing cross-border commerce. That is money once earmarked for schools, roads, and emergency services, now evaporating into a void created by tariff crossfire. When a local budget bleeds millions, it is not politicians who suffer first, it is families. Is this really the price of economic sovereignty or just collateral damage in a political game? And lumber is not alone. Washington's tariff net has widened to capture steel, aluminum, and copper, with duties soaring as high as 50%. For American builders, that is a noose tightening by the day. A project that once penciled out at $40 million can suddenly demand $50 million, straining financing and delaying groundbreakings nationwide. Developers talk about a perfect storm where every input, wood, metal, labor, is inflating at once. Can United States infrastructure survive when its building blocks are taxed into paralysis? The scale of the rupture becomes clearer when you zoom out. In 2023, bilateral trade between the United States and Canada reached a staggering $58 billion across key commodities. Today, that flow teeters on the edge of collapse. From groceries to cars, from energy to construction, the world's longest undefended border is transforming into a front line of economic conflict. Is this the beginning of a decoupling once thought impossible? Globally, allies and rivals alike are watching. Europe worries about supply shocks spreading through global steel and aluminum markets. Asian economies see opportunities to replace American buyers shut out of Canadian exports. The ripple effects are no longer regional, they are planetary. And the question hangs heavy. If the United States and Canada cannot keep trade stable, what chance does the broader world have against the next supply war? Canada has made its move. Ontario is no longer the passive partner in this decades long trade dispute. By shutting off the lifeline of softwood lumber, it has shifted from defense to offense, proving that supply itself can be the most powerful leverage. Overnight, America's construction backbone, built on imported Canadian wood, has been exposed as vulnerable. And that vulnerability is not theoretical, it is immediate. Even if United States mills run at maximum capacity, the math does not add up. America produces only about 70% of its domestic demand, leaving a gap of nearly 30% that no other supplier in the world can fill quickly. Germany offers just 2 million cubic meters a year, Sweden around 1 million, and Chile even less, compared to Canada's 28 million cubic meters annually. Those numbers barely scratch the surface. In practical terms, the United States cannot build its way forward without Canadian lumber. The dependency is undeniable. The financial fallout is already unfolding. Builders report costs rising by $5,000 to $8,000 per home in the near term, with projections of $20,000 to $30,000 if the supply crunch deepens. A $250,000 home in Texas could soon cost $280,000 or more. A $400,000 house in California might jump to nearly $430,000. Mortgage lenders warn of tighter credit, while families saving for a first home see the finish line move further away. For retirees, fixed incomes now stretch thinner as property taxes and repair costs climb. Who bears the heaviest burden? Not governments, not corporations. It is the everyday American household. And yet, beyond the spreadsheets and forecasts lies a deeper truth. This is not just about lumber, it is about sovereignty, strategy, and the fragile balance of global trade. Ontario's decision to expand into Asia and Europe and to move from raw exports to higher value products like engineered wood and modular housing means Canada could emerge stronger even as the United States struggles. That irony cuts deep. The tariff meant to protect American industry may end up accelerating Canada's rise instead. So the choice now rests with Washington. Does it hold the line, risking a prolonged supply crisis and a housing affordability disaster? Or does it pull back, recognizing that a trade war fought with building materials can dismantle not just homes, but the foundations of public trust in economic leadership. The lumber standoff is more than a policy clash. It is a mirror reflecting where North America stands in a world of shifting power. And the question that lingers is, will the United States adapt or continue pushing itself deeper into a corner of its own making? If you found this story important, remember to save this video, share it, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Because the debate over tariffs, trade, and the future of housing is not just politics. It is about the lives we build and the homes we hope to leave behind. But the foundations of those homes are now being tested by forces far beyond the construction site. Behind the policy debates in Washington and Ottawa, a high-stakes political chess match is unfolding with lobbyists from both the powerful United States Lumber Coalition and the sprawling National Association of Home Builders spending tens of millions to sway lawmakers. The former argues for national pride and protection against what they label unfair Canadian subsidies, while the latter warns of a generational housing crisis that could lock millions out of the market. This internal conflict paralyzes any chance of a coherent strategy, leaving American families and businesses caught in the political crossfire. The economic pain radiates outward, creating secondary shocks that seldom make headlines. Consider the logistics sector. Trucking companies that built their business models on the predictable flow of lumber across the Ambassador Bridge now face bankruptcy. Warehousing facilities in border states sit half empty, and the insurance industry is quietly rewriting risk models for construction financing, adding another layer of cost for builders already on the brink. These are the hidden taxes of the trade war, paid not at the border but in lost jobs, failed businesses, and deferred dreams across the American heartland. The human cost of this economic warfare is starkly different on each side of the border. In Phoenix, a framing contractor who runs a small family business is telling his crew he cannot make payroll next month. The soaring cost of 2x4s has rendered his existing contracts unprofitable, and he sees no path forward. Meanwhile, in a technologically advanced mill outside Trois-Rivières, Quebec, a worker is being retrained to operate a computerized system that fabricates bespoke modular housing components for a new client in Germany. Her future, once tied to the volatile American housing market, now seems more secure and prosperous as her company pivots to higher value global exports. This tale of two workers encapsulates the strategic divergence. One nation is mired in a self-inflicted supply crisis, while the other is forced to innovate and in doing so strengthens its position on the world stage. This strategic realignment is already etching new lines on the global trade map. Canada is finalizing long-term supply agreements with a consortium of Japanese and South Korean builders, ensuring demand for its products for a decade to come. The Port of Vancouver is buzzing with activity, its ships heading west across the Pacific, not south to American ports. Back in the United States, efforts to source lumber from Scandinavia and South America are hitting logistical and financial walls. While the quality is high, shipping costs add nearly 20% to the price, and differences in grading standards are causing costly delays on American job sites. The simple truth is, that the decades of seamless North American integration cannot be easily replaced by a patchwork of distant, more expensive suppliers. Ultimately, this lumber dispute serves as a chilling precedent for the future of global trade. It demonstrates how quickly integrated supply chains can be weaponized, turning everyday commodities into instruments of geopolitical leverage. If a stable partnership like the one between the United States and Canada can fracture so quickly over lumber, what might happen with more strategic resources? Could Canada leverage its vast reserves of potash for agriculture or the critical minerals essential for electric vehicle batteries in future disputes? The era of a frictionless North American market may be drawing to a close, replaced by a more contentious and transactional relationship. The world's longest undefended border is now being fortified not with walls, but with tariffs, quotas,